Bram had lived alone for many years. His small farmhouse stood at the edge of a quiet village, surrounded by old oak trees and fields that turned gold in summer. Bram did not mind the silence. He had his garden, his books, and the memories of his wife, who had loved the smell of fresh flowers as much as he did. One night, as Bram sat by the fireplace with a cup of tea, he felt a soft rumble under his feet. He looked up from his book and listened. The wind outside whispered through the branches. Then he saw it, through his window, a streak of silver light crossing the night sky. It was bright, brighter than any shooting star Bram had ever seen. It left a trail of blue sparks behind it, and then, far off in the woods, he heard a muffled thud. Bram stood up slowly and put on his old coat. He reached for his lantern, lit it, and stepped into his boots by the door. Outside, the night air was cold and smelled of damp earth and pine. He held the lantern high and started walking toward the woods behind his house. The trees stood tall and dark, but Bram knew this forest well. He had walked these paths for years, looking for wild herbs, or just to listen to the birds. Tonight, the only sound was the crunch of leaves under his boots and the soft creak of the lantern's handle. After a while, Bram saw a faint glow ahead. He stopped for a moment, his heart beating faster. The light flickered like a candle caught in the wind. Carefully, Bram stepped closer. He pushed aside a low branch and gasped. In a small clearing, a strange object lay half buried in the soft earth. It was no bigger than a horse cart, but smooth and silver like polished stone. Around it, the grass was scorched in a perfect circle. A thin line of smoke rose into the air, carrying a sweet, sharp smell Bram did not know. He stepped closer, holding the lantern over the object. It was shaped like a seed or a pod. At its side, he saw a crack like a door pushed open from inside. Bram's breath made small clouds in the cold air as he leaned in. Inside the pod, he saw something that made him draw back in surprise. A girl, no older than 12 or 13, lay curled up, her arms wrapped around a small crystal that glowed with a gentle blue light. Her skin was pale and seemed to shine under the lantern's glow. Her hair was silver too, like the pod, and spread around her like silk. Bram could see she was breathing, but only just. Her chest rose and fell so slowly, it looked like she might stop at any moment. Bram's first thought was to run to the village and call the doctor. But then he looked at her again. He saw the way her fingers clutched the crystal, as if it were the only thing keeping her alive. He saw how thin she was, how her lips trembled even in sleep. He thought of his daughter, long gone now, who had once fallen sick in winter, and how he had carried her through snow to the doctor's door. Bram knew he could not leave this girl here in the cold woods. He set the lantern down on a rock and bent forward. The pod felt warm when he touched it. Carefully, he slid his arms under the girl. She was lighter than he expected, like lifting a bundle of blankets. The crystal stayed pressed to her chest as he lifted her. She made a small sound, a soft sigh, but did not wake. Bram wrapped his old scarf around her shoulders. He looked once more at the pod, its silver sides catching the lantern light like moonlight on water. He had no idea what it was or where it came from, but right now, that did not matter. He picked up the lantern with one hand and held the girl close with the other. The walk back to his house felt longer than before. The wind picked up, rustling the branches above him. He could feel her shiver in his arms, so he held her tighter and whispered, "It's all right now. You're safe, little one." When Bram reached his farmhouse, he pushed the door open with his shoulder and stepped inside. The warmth from the fireplace made him sigh with relief. He laid the girl gently on the old sofa by the fire and covered her with a thick blanket. For a moment, he just stood there, looking at her. Her face was calm now, though her breathing was still slow. The crystal rested on her chest, glowing softly like a night lamp. Bram made more tea, though he knew she could not drink it yet. He found a clean cloth and wiped the dirt from her hands and face. Up close, he saw faint lines on her skin, like tiny silver veins that glowed when the firelight touched them. She was not like any child he had ever seen. But she was still a child, alone and far from home. Bram sat in his old armchair and watched. The fire dance. Outside, the wind howled through the trees. He wondered what tomorrow would bring, what questions the village would ask if they found out about the silver pod hidden in his woods. But for now, none of that mattered. Tonight, all that mattered was the small, fragile life sleeping by his hearth dot as the fire burned low. Bram closed his eyes for a moment. He thought he heard a voice, soft and strange, whispering in words he could not understand. When he opened his eyes, the girl had shifted closer to the warmth, still holding the crystal tight. Bram smiled, pulled the blanket higher around her shoulders and whispered again, "You're safe here." And in that small farmhouse at the edge of the woods, under a sky full of stars, a kind old man and an orphaned princess began a story that would one day echo far beyond the garden walls. Morning sunlight touched Bram's farmhouse gently. Thin rays slipped through the old curtains and fell on the small figure still sleeping on Bram's worn-out sofa. Bram woke up early, as he always did. He stretched his stiff legs and looked over at the girl. She was still there, still breathing, the small blue crystal resting on her chest like a piece of the sky. Bram put another log on the fire. The room warmed up slowly. He set a pot of water to boil and took out some bread and a small jar of honey. He spread the honey on a piece of bread and placed it on a plate near the girl, just in case she woke hungry. After a while, the girl stirred. Her eyelids fluttered like tiny silver moths. She opened her eyes. They were pale green, brighter than spring leaves. She looked around the room, confused. Her gaze fell on Bram. For a moment, her eyes widened in fear. She pressed the crystal tighter to her chest and tried to sit up, but her arms were weak. "It's all right," Bram said in his soft, tired voice. "You're safe here, little one." The girl's lips moved, but no sound came out. She looked at the bread, then at the fire, then back at Bram. Slowly she opened her mouth and spoke one word. Her voice was soft, like wind through tall grass. "Safe?" she asked. "Yes," Bram said, nodding. "Safe." He pushed the plate of bread closer to her. She looked at it as if she had never seen bread before. With trembling fingers, she broke off a small piece. She sniffed it, then placed it carefully in her mouth. Her eyes closed as she chewed. Bram saw a tiny smile appear at the corner of her lips. He could not help but smile too. When she finished the bread, Bram poured some warm water into a cup and held it out to her. She drank slowly, drops of water shining on her silver hair. Then she looked at him again and pointed to herself. "Lyra," she said, her voice clearer now. "Lyra," Bram repeated. "That's your name?" She nodded. Then she pointed to him. "Bram," he said. "I am Bram," she whispered back. The way she said it made the old man's heart feel warm, like a hidden ember catching fire again. Lyra looked around the room. Her eyes fell on the old photos on the wall. Bram and his wife, Bram holding a baby girl, a small garden full of roses. She touched her chest, as if trying to find words. "Home?" she asked. Bram understood. He sat down on the wooden chair near the sofa and sighed. "This is my home," he said. "And now, it's yours too. For as long as you need." Lyra watched the fire for a long time. Then she lay back down, the crystal still in her hand. Her eyes closed, but Bram could see her mouth moving, forming words in a language he did not know. He wondered what she was saying, maybe prayers to her family, wherever they were, or words of goodbye. Later that day, Bram went to his small shed and brought back some old clothes. They had belonged to his granddaughter Mia, who had outgrown them long ago. He washed them and laid them near Lyra. She watched him do this, her eyes soft but full of questions. "Try these," Bram said gently. Lyra touched the soft cotton dress with her thin fingers. She looked shy but grateful. Bram turned away to give her privacy while she changed. When he turned back, he saw her sitting up, wrapped in the simple dress that was a little too big for her. But she looked better already, like a wild flower finding sun after rain. In the days that followed, Lyra grew stronger. Bram made simple soups, carrots, potatoes, a bit of salt, and Lyra ate every spoonful slowly, like each taste was a new treasure. She began to sit by the window during the day, watching the birds peck at seeds Bram scattered on the old stone path. Sometimes she would tap the glass and mimic the birds' soft calls. Bram would smile and shake his head, amazed at how curious she was about every small thing. When Lyra felt strong enough to walk, Bram took her outside. He showed her the small patch of land behind the house where he grew cabbages, onions, and sweet peas. Lyra knelt in the soil, her fingers pressing into the earth as if she wanted to listen to it. She closed her eyes and hummed softly, a tune Bram had never heard before. The breeze carried the tune through the garden, making the tall grass dance. One afternoon, while Bram tended his cabbages, Lyra sat near the fence and drew shapes in the dirt with a stick. She drew a circle, then lines spreading from it like sun rays. She pointed to the sky, then to the drawing, then back to Bram. "Home," she said. "Far." Bram sat down beside her. He studied the simple shape. He understood enough. Her home was far, maybe among the stars. He wanted to ask more, but he could see how her eyes grew sad when she spoke of it. So he only nodded. "That's far indeed," he said. "But you are here now, Lyra, with me." She looked at him, then at the small farmhouse, then at the flowers Bram had planted near the fence. A small smile lit up her face. She pressed her palm flat against the earth and closed her eyes. Bram felt, though he did not know how, that she was thanking the ground for holding her gently. Each night, Bram would find her curled up on the sofa, the blue crystal beside her head like a tiny star fallen to earth. Sometimes she would whisper, in her sleep, words that made no sense to Bram. He did not mind. He only covered her with the blanket and sat in his chair by the fire. He wondered who she really was, why she had come here, what the crystal meant. But these questions could wait. For now, she was just a child who needed warmth, bread, and a kind old man to stand, watch as she dreamed of places far away. And as the nights grew warmer and the garden slowly woke up for spring, Bram began to feel something he had not felt for many years: hope. Each day, the sun rose a little earlier and the ground softened under Bram's careful hands. Winter's chill was fading, and tiny green shoots pushed through the dark earth behind his farmhouse. It was planting season, Bram's favorite time of year. Lyra sat on the back step, wrapped in Bram's old wool shawl. Her silver hair glowed in the soft morning light. She watched Bram move between rows of soil with his spade and small rake. His hands were steady and sure. He spoke to the earth like an old friend. "Come now, Lyra," Bram called, glancing over his shoulder. "Time you learned how this garden grows." Lyra's eyes widened. She stood slowly and walked barefoot through the damp grass until she stood beside him. Bram handed her a small wooden trowel. She turned it over in her hand as if it were a strange new tool from her world among the stars. Bram knelt and showed her how to dig a small hole, how deep to press the seeds, and how to cover them gently with soil. Lyra watched every move, her green eyes serious. When Bram held out a handful of tiny carrot seeds, she cupped them in her palm as if they were precious jewels. She copied Bram's motions, digging, placing the seeds, pressing the dirt. Once she looked up at him, seeking approval. Bram only nodded with a warm smile. "Well done, Lyra," he said. "These will grow strong, you'll see." When they finished planting the carrots, Bram showed her the peas next. Lyra worked quietly beside him, never complaining about the dirt under her nails or the mud on her dress. Sometimes she paused to touch the soft leaves or let a worm crawl across her fingers. Bram watched her and thought how strange and beautiful it was. A girl. From the stars tending to the simplest life on Earth. By noon, they sat side by side on the grass. Bram poured them both cups of warm water with a drop of honey stirred in. Lyra sipped hers slowly, her eyes drifting toward the blue sky above the trees. She pointed upward. "Far," she said. "My people there." Bram followed her gaze. He saw only drifting clouds, but in his mind, he imagined a sky full of ships and bright cities hidden beyond stars. He wondered what Lyra's world looked like. Gardens bigger than oceans, maybe. Or towers of light taller than the tallest oak tree here. "Do you miss it?" Bram asked gently. Lyra did not answer at first. She closed her eyes and tilted her face to the sun. Then she nodded once, very slowly. "Miss," she said. She opened her eyes again and looked at Bram. "But here." "Warm," Bram chuckled. "Aye, warm enough for old bones too." In the evenings, Bram would light a small lantern and bring out his battered star chart. He had kept it from his younger days when he would lie on the hill behind the farmhouse and name constellations for his daughter. Now he spread the chart on the table, and Lyra would lean close, pointing at tiny marks with her small, careful finger. "One star," she whispered, touching a cluster near the edge of the paper. "Home." Bram traced her finger with his rough thumb. The star she pointed to had no name on his chart. Just a dot, lost among thousands. "Is it beautiful?" he asked. Lyra's face glowed. She pressed the crystal she always carried against her chest. The blue light shone brighter, and her eyes turned soft, like someone seeing a memory they love. "Light. Songs, flowers like sky," she said, her words slow but clear. "All bright, all kind." Bram nodded, picturing fields of silver blossoms and voices singing under two moons. He wondered how such a peaceful place could be lost, how such a gentle child had fallen so far to land here in his quiet garden. One night, after Bram had dozed off in his chair, he woke to a soft hum. At first, he thought it was the wind under the door. But then he saw Lyra sitting cross-legged by the window, her crystal cupped in her hands. She was humming, a tune that sounded like many voices woven together. It was both happy and sad. Bram did not speak. He only listened. As Lyra sang, tiny sparks of light danced above the crystal, like little fireflies. They floated around her head, flickering in and out until they vanished into the dark corners of the room. When she finished, Lyra looked at Bram with shy eyes, as if she had been caught doing something secret. Bram only smiled and whispered, "Beautiful." After that night, Bram noticed something new. The seeds they had planted sprouted faster than he expected. Tiny shoots of green pushed up strong and straight. The cabbage leaves opened wide like small umbrellas catching the sun. Even the old apple tree by the fence, which had not given fruit for 3 years, showed fresh buds on its tired branches. One morning, Bram found Lyra kneeling by the carrot row, her small hands pressed flat on the soil. She was humming the same soft tune. Bees drifted around her, landing on tiny wildflowers that had not grown there before. Bram did not interrupt. He stood at a distance, watching. He realized then that Lyra was more than a lost child. She carried something inside her that made life stronger, even here, in a small corner of Earth. After supper that evening, Bram sat with Lyra by the fireplace. He pulled out an old wooden box and opened it carefully. Inside was a thin silver chain, his wife's necklace. He placed it in Lyra's palm. "This was my Mary's," he said. "She always said it brought her peace. Maybe it can help you, too." Lyra looked at the chain, then at Bram. She touched the necklace to her crystal. The blue glow spread gently over the silver. Then she slipped the chain around her neck and leaned her head on Bram's shoulder. For a moment, the old man felt young again, not because time had turned back, But because something new had grown where loneliness used to live, and outside the small farmhouse, under a sky bright with distant stars, tiny green leaves pushed through the earth, carrying hope for a harvest no frost could ever take away. Days turned into weeks, and Bram's small garden grew thick with green life. Tiny white flowers bloomed on the pea plants. The carrots stretched deeper into the dark earth. Each morning, Bram and Lyra walked the rows together. Lyra would hum her soft song, and Bram would chuckle when he saw new blossoms where there had been none the day before. One warm afternoon, Bram decided to take Lyra to the village. She needed a proper pair of shoes. Her small feet were always muddy and cold, and Bram did not want her to get sick. So he washed his old truck, brushed the dirt from the seats, and told Lyra they would go on a short journey. Lyra sat beside him in the passenger seat, her crystal hidden safely in the pocket of her coat. She looked out the window as the fields rolled by. Sheep grazed under soft clouds. Birds flew low over barley fields turning gold under the sun. Everything seemed to catch her wide green eyes, as if the world was full of tiny miracles. When they reached the village, Bram parked near the little shoe shop. He helped Lyra out of the truck, and she stood close to him, one hand clutching his sleeve. The village was quiet but busy enough. Children chased each other near the old fountain. A farmer loaded sacks of grain onto his cart, and a baker called out his fresh bread prices to passers-by. Inside the shoe shop, Bram spoke with Mrs. Dana, an old friend. She was a kind woman with gentle eyes and strong arms from years of tying shoelaces for children who never sat still. "This is Lyra," Bram said softly. "She's staying with me for now, needs good shoes for the garden." Mrs. Dana smiled at Lyra, but Lyra hid half her face behind Bram's arm. Mrs. Dana chuckled. "Don't worry, child. We'll find you something soft and warm," she said kindly. She showed Lyra a pair of small brown boots lined with soft wool. Lyra touched them gently, running her fingers along the stitching. When she slipped her feet into them, her eyes lit up. She tapped her feet on the wooden floor and looked at Bram with a shy smile. "They fit well," Bram said, pleased. He paid. Mrs. Dana, who handed Lyra a small cloth bag with sweet candies inside. "For you, dear," Mrs. Dana said. "A little welcome to our village." Outside the shop, Bram sat Lyra on the low stone wall by the fountain. She unwrapped a candy and popped it into her mouth, her eyes sparkling at the sweetness. Bram sat beside her, feeling the warm sun on his back. He looked at Lyra and felt, once again, that strange sense of new roots growing inside his heart. But that peaceful moment did not last long. While they rested, Bram noticed two men standing near the fountain's edge. They were dressed in dark clothes, not like the simple coats of the villagers. They did not smile or greet anyone. Instead, they spoke in low voices, glancing around as if searching for something. Lyra noticed them too. She tensed and pressed closer to Bram. Her hand slipped into her coat pocket, touching her crystal. Bram placed a comforting arm around her shoulders. "It's all right, child," he whispered. But his eyes stayed on the two strangers. One of the men noticed Lyra's silver hair. He nudged his partner and pointed. They spoke again, then slowly walked away down the narrow street. Bram's heart beat faster than it had in years. He did not know who they were, but he did not like the way they looked at Lyra, like she was not just a child but something they wanted to take. "Come now," Bram said softly. "Time to go home." Back in the truck, Lyra sat silent, her small hands clutching the crystal tight under her coat. She stared out the window but did not see the sheep or the fields this time. Her thoughts were far away. Bram glanced at her, then back at the road. He drove faster than usual, dust rising behind the old truck's tires. When they reached the farmhouse, Bram parked behind the barn instead of out front. He helped Lyra out and guided her inside quickly. He locked the door, then peeked through the curtain. The road was empty. No sign of the strangers. Bram made Lyra a cup of warm milk with honey and told her to sit by the fire. She curled up on the sofa, the crystal pressed tight to her chest. Her eyes watched the flames dance, but her mind was somewhere far away. Among stars, maybe, or hidden memories she could not yet share. Bram sat at the table, deep in thought. Who were those men? How did they know to look for Lyra? He wished he could ask her more, but he knew she was still learning his words, still learning how to say the things locked inside her heart. That night, as Lyra slept, Bram pulled an old blanket from the cupboard and hung it over the window. He checked the door twice. He even found the small rusty lock he had never used in years and clicked it shut. Then he sat in his chair, watching the girl sleep. The blue crystal glowed softly near her heart. Bram thought about his wife Mary, how she always said kindness could change the hardest days. He wondered if Mary would know what to do now. Outside, an owl called from the apple tree. The stars shone down, cold and clear, but inside the little house, the fire crackled warm and steady. Bram leaned back in his chair and whispered a promise. He was not sure Lyra could hear. "You're safe here, little one," he said softly. "I won't let anyone take you." And though the old man's bones were tired and his hands were rough with age, his heart felt strong enough to guard the roots and the stars, both growing together in his small, warm home. The next few days passed quietly at Bram's little farmhouse, but a feeling of worry hung in the air like a thin mist. Lyra still helped in the garden every morning. She wore her new boots proudly, and sometimes Bram caught her tapping her toes in the soft dirt, humming to the young plants. But whenever a bird called too sharply or the wind rattled the barn door, she would stop and look around quickly, clutching her crystal under her coat. Bram tried to keep life normal. He cooked her warm stews and told her simple stories about when he was a boy. He even found an old tin whistle in a drawer and played a few soft tunes by the fire. Lyra liked that. She sat close to him on the wooden floor, swaying gently with the music. Sometimes she tried to copy the whistle's notes with her own hums. Her soft voice made the little house feel alive like spring sunlight warming old walls. But Bram's mind was busy. Each night, when Lyra fell asleep, he sat by the window, watching the empty road. He kept the lantern low so the house would look dark from far away. Twice he thought he saw shapes moving between the trees at the edge of his land, but when he stepped outside with his old walking stick, there was nothing, only the wind and the quiet rustle of leaves. One night, after Lyra had fallen asleep, with her crystal glowing faintly on her chest, Bram sat in his chair by the fire. He was half dozing when he heard a soft knock at the door. It was so light he thought he imagined it. But then it came again, 3 small taps. Bram's eyes opened wide. He stood slowly and looked at Lyra. She did not wake, but the blue glow of her crystal pulsed brighter for a moment, like it felt something too. Bram picked up his old walking stick and went to the door. He pressed his ear against it. Silence. "Who's there?" He called in a low voice. A voice answered, soft and tired. "Please, sir, I'm lost. May I have some water?" Bram's heart thudded in his chest. He thought of the strangers in the village. But the voice sounded small, almost like a child's. Carefully, Bram lifted the wooden bar and opened the door a crack. Outside stood a young boy. His clothes were dusty and his feet were bare. His hair was dark and messy. He looked no older than 12. He held out his hands, showing he carried nothing. "Please, sir," the boy said again. "I have walked far. I'm hungry." Bram looked behind the boy. The yard was empty. No shadows, no dark figures waiting. Bram's mind told him to be careful, but his heart, the part of him that had taken Lyra in, would not let him turn. The boy away. "Come in then," Bram said gruffly. Though his eyes were kind, the boy stepped inside, shivering as he crossed the threshold. Bram closed the door quickly and locked it again. The boy looked around the warm room, eyes wide at the glowing fire and the kettle steaming gently on the hearth. "What's your name?" Bram asked. "Ren," said the boy. His voice was soft but steady. "I ran away from the big road." "Bad." "Men came. I hid in the woods." Bram's eyes narrowed. "Bad men?" Ren nodded. "2 men in black coats. They asked about a girl with silver hair." Bram's breath caught in his throat. He glanced at Lyra, still sleeping on the small couch. Ren's eyes followed Bram's, and he saw the sleeping girl too. Something in his gaze softened. "You know her," Ren said. Though it was not a question, Bram placed a mug of warm milk in Ren's hands. "Drink first," he said. "Talk later." Ren drank greedily, wiping his mouth on his sleeve when he finished. Bram gave him a slice of bread and cheese too. The boy ate in quiet bites, careful not to wake Lyra. When he was done, he sat cross-legged on the floor, looking at Bram with eyes too old for his young face. "They asked everyone on the road," Ren said softly. "They showed a paper with a picture, said she is dangerous. But she is not, is she?" Bram sat down heavily in his chair. He rubbed his hands over his face. "No, lad," he said at last. "She is not dangerous. She is only lost." Ren looked at Lyra again. The crystal on her chest glowed brighter for a second, as if it felt Ren's eyes. "She's like light," Ren whispered. "Warm," Bram nodded. He felt a sudden rush of pride for the girl. She was like light, soft but strong, quiet but growing new life in the cracks of an old man's world. "You may stay here tonight," Bram told Ren. "No roads tonight." "Too many shadows." Ren looked grateful. Bram found him a blanket and made a soft bed near the hearth. The boy lay down, curling up like a kitten near the warmth. Bram sat back in his chair, his eyes moving between Ren and Lyra. He wondered what tomorrow would bring. Before he let sleep take him, Bram whispered, "To the old wooden walls, the garden outside, the stars above. Keep them safe," he murmured. "All of them." And outside, the apple tree rustled in the wind, as if it promised to stand guard to when dawn came. A soft light touched the window. Lyra woke first, her eyes bright. She saw Ren sleeping by the fire. For a moment she looked afraid, but then Ren stirred and smiled at her. He held up his small hand, palm open. "Hello," Ren said gently. "I'm friend." Lyra touched her crystal and smiled back, though she said nothing. Bram watched this small moment from his chair and felt something new. Not fear, but hope. He knew the strangers might come again. But he also knew he was not alone. Not anymore. And so, as the first birds sang at the edge of his field, Bram stood and opened the door to the garden. Lyra and Ren followed side by side. Together they stepped into the morning, the old man and the children of roots and stars, ready to face whatever waited on the road beyond the hills. Days passed, and the old farmhouse felt fuller than it ever had before. Bram could hardly remember when the rooms had felt so warm with voices and footsteps. Lyra and Ren woke early every morning to help him in the garden. Lyra watered the new carrot sprouts and whispered her hums to the plants. Ren dug neat rows for more seeds and fetched buckets of water from the well behind the barn. At night, the 3 of them sat together by the fire. Bram read from an old book of stories. Lyra could not read yet, but she listened closely, eyes wide, as Bram's deep voice carried tales of brave kings, hidden forests, and animals that spoke kindly to children. Sometimes Ren asked questions about the world beyond the hills. He wanted to know if there were other places as safe as Bram's farm. Bram always answered the same way. "Safety is not always in places, boy. It lives in people." Ren did not always understand, but he liked the sound of it. One evening, after a supper of warm stew and fresh bread, Bram sat outside on the old bench beneath the apple tree. He looked up at the stars that blinked above the dark fields. Lyra and Ren came out quietly and sat on either side of him. The night was cool, but gentle, the kind that made stories feel closer than dreams. Why do you watch the sky every night? Wren asked Bram. Bram smiled, scratching his beard. Because once, long ago, I promised someone I'd never forget how big the world is. The sky reminds me. Wren nodded, though he still didn't understand all of Bram's secrets. Lyra leaned, her head on Bram's shoulder, her silver hair glowing in the starlight. She pointed up at a bright star and whispered one word Bram had taught her. Home. Bram's chest tightened. He looked down at her small hand wrapped around her crystal. He knew the crystal was part of her story, but she could not yet tell him all of it. He did not push her. He only waited, because he knew seeds only bloom when they are ready. Wren shifted on the bench. He seemed restless. He looked at Lyra and then at Bram, as if he held something heavy in his mind. Can I tell you something? Wren asked Bram. Of course, boy. Wren's eyes darted around, checking the shadows under the trees. The wind rustled the tall grass. But nothing moved closer. When I ran from the men in black coats, Wren began slowly, I heard them talking. They want the girl. They know she has something they need. Lyra's fingers tightened around her crystal. Bram placed his big, warm hand over hers. He looked at Wren and nodded for him to go on. They said, She is the last one, Wren whispered. The last of her kind. They want the stone. If they get it, they can find where she came from. Bram felt a chill despite the warm night. He looked at Lyra, whose green eyes shone with worry but also trust that Bram would keep her safe. Wren continued, I think they will come here. They want the light she carries. Bram sat back and let Wren's words sink in. He felt the night pressing close, as if the stars were listening too. He knew the world was changing, that the quiet life he'd lived for so long was no longer just his own. Now it belonged to Lyra, to Wren, to their secret that pulsed like a small sun in Lyra's tiny hands. Lyra sat up straight. She held out her crystal for Wren and Bram to see. Its blue light glowed brighter in the darkness. For a moment, Bram thought he could see tiny shapes inside it, like swirling stars, a whole sky trapped in a stone. Lyra placed the crystal in Bram's hand. She looked him in the eye and pointed at the stars. Then she pressed her small hand over her heart. She wants you to know, Wren said, watching her carefully, that it is not just a stone. It is part of her. If they take it, they take her light. Bram closed his hand around the crystal. It felt warm and alive, like holding a tiny flame that did not burn, but gave hope instead. I see, little one, Bram whispered to Lyra. I promise they will not take it. They will not take you. Wren looked up at Bram with new trust. What will we do if they come? Bram thought of the old barn, the back fields, the woods that stretched far behind his land. He thought of all the places a child and a kind old man could hide. But he also thought about standing tall, like the trees that never ran, no matter how hard the wind blew. We will be ready, Bram said at last. And we will not hide forever. If they come, they will learn what humans do best, protect what is dear. Lyra smiled softly at that. She leaned her head on Bram's arm again, feeling safe for now. The three of them sat in silence. Above them, the stars shone brighter, and Bram could almost imagine they were watching over the little farmhouse, guarding the secrets hidden in the quiet night. When the wind blew, the apple tree's branches bent gently, as if to wrap the small family in a green embrace. Bram knew the road ahead would not be easy. He was old, and his bones were slow. But inside him, something strong had woken, the same thing that made humans cross seas, build homes, and fight for the ones they love. Lyra slipped the crystal back into her coat pocket. She hummed a tune that seemed older than the earth. Wren lay down on the bench, his head in Bram's lap, already half asleep under the sky. And Bram, kind, weathered Bram, looked out across his dark fields and whispered a promise to the stars. You are not alone, he said softly, his voice steady. No one will take your light, little ones, not while I breathe. And far away, behind the dark hills, the wind carried his words across the sleeping world, planting seeds of hope where fear once tried to grow. Morning came softly to Bram's farm. The first rays of sun slipped through the trees and touched the roof of the little house where 3 souls slept close together. Birds sang in the orchard. The garden, freshly watered by Lyra's careful hands, seemed to stretch toward the new day. Inside, Bram stirred awake in his chair by the window. Wren lay curled up near the hearth, still dreaming. Lyra was on the old couch, the crystal held tight in her small hands. Even in sleep, its soft glow warmed her cheeks. Bram stood slowly, his back stiff but his spirit strong. He went outside to check the garden rows. He found a few fresh eggs in the henhouse and picked the last sweet strawberries for breakfast. When he came back inside, Lyra and Wren were already awake. They sat together on the floor, sharing quiet words. Lyra traced small shapes on the wooden boards with her finger. A star, a tree, a little swirl that looked like a path. Wren watched and nodded as if he understood every line. Bram made them warm porridge with berries. They ate in gentle silence, listening to the morning sounds, the breeze through the orchard, the low hum of bees outside the window, the faint whisper. The crystal when Lyra held it to her ear. After breakfast, Bram spoke. "Children," he said softly, "today we must make a plan." Wren looked up, wiping his mouth with his sleeve. "A plan for when they come?" Bram nodded. Lyra's eyes flickered to the window, where the road lay hidden beyond the apple trees. She held her crystal tighter, as if it knew what the old man meant. "They will come," Bram said, his voice calm but certain. "When they find we did not run, they will come here to take what they want, but we will not hide like mice." Wren's brow furrowed. "What will we do, Bram?" Bram smiled, a small, brave smile that lit up the lines of his old face. We'll show them what family means. We stand together. If they want her light, they will find us strong." Lyra reached out and placed her small hand over Bram's. Her touch was light, but he felt the warmth of it spread through his chest like firewood, catching flame. All day they worked. Bram showed Wren how to lock the barn doors tight and how to bar the farmhouse windows with old planks. Lyra helped gather fresh water and dried herbs. They filled jars and baskets and hid them under the floorboards, just in case they had to stay inside for many nights. When evening came, the 3 of them sat outside again under the apple tree. The sky was painted in soft gold and deep purple. Fireflies blinked in the tall grass, like tiny stars come down to earth to keep them company. Wren sat with his knees pulled up to his chest. "Bram," he asked, "are you scared?" Bram thought about the question for a moment. He looked at Lyra, who hummed softly while playing with a fallen apple blossom. "I am old," Bram said at last. "I have seen storms and hard winters. Fear comes and goes like the wind, but love, that stays. So no, lad, I am not scared." Wren seemed to understand. He lay back in the grass and watched the first real stars appear. When darkness wrapped the farm in its soft blanket, Bram kept watch by the window. Lyra and Wren slept side by side near the fire. The night was quiet, but Bram's heart was busy. He listened for footsteps, for voices. He knew the men in black coats would not knock softly like Wren had. They would come like a cold wind through a broken door. And just before dawn, Bram heard it, the low rumble of an engine far down the road. Then, faint footsteps in the orchard. A branch snapped. A whisper, sharp and cold. Bram placed a gentle hand on Lyra's shoulder. She woke at once, eyes wide but calm. Wren sat up too, blinking away sleep. "They are here," Bram said softly. "Stay behind me." The knock on the door was not gentle this time. It was loud, hard, 3 times. Bram opened the door just enough to see 2 figures in dark coats. Their faces were hidden by shadows, But Bram saw cold eyes and hard mouths. "Give." "US the girl," one said flatly. "And the stone, no trouble." Bram stood tall. His old hands shook slightly, but his eyes were strong. "She is no stone," he said. "She is light, and she is family. You will not take her." The second man stepped forward, boots crunching on the old porch boards. "You are one old man and two children. Do not be foolish." Inside, Ren held Lyra's hand. Lyra pressed her crystal to her chest. The glow brightened, pouring soft blue light through the cracks in Bram's coat. Bram did not move. He felt something behind him, a warmth that filled the small room. Lyra's light grew stronger, as if the little crystal heard the cold voices and chose its side. "I am not alone," Bram said. His voice was quiet, but it carried like thunder through the night. A sudden breeze swept through the orchard. The branches shook. The men stepped back, surprised by the wind that came from nowhere. Inside the house, Lyra stepped forward. She stood beside Bram, small and brave. Ren joined her, his thin hand gripping her arm. The crystal's light grew so bright it filled the doorway, spilling into the night like a dawn come too early. The men shouted and covered their eyes. They stumbled back, blinded by the gentle power of the child's light. Bram spoke one last time, his voice deep and kind and unafraid. "Go. You will not find darkness here, only hope." The wind carried his words across the fields. The men turned and fled into the trees, their footsteps lost in the orchard's song. Inside the farmhouse, the light softened to a warm glow. Lyra looked at Bram and Ren. Her small hand touched her heart, then their hands too. Together, they stood in the doorway as the sun rose. The danger was not gone forever. Bram knew more might come. But he also knew something greater. The light they carried could not be stolen, because it did not live in the stone alone. It lived in their hearts, in their joined hands, in the old farmhouse that now held not just a secret, but a family. And as the first birds sang to the waking world, Bram, Lyra, and Ren stepped